All right, so today we're going to talk specifically about buying homes in Tennessee and the financing available to do that. So the first thing you need to know about buying a home in Tennessee is what type of homes are available here. So depending on where you want to move to, whether it's an urban area or a more rural area, there's going to be a lot of different types of housing, and the types of housing will dictate what type of financing is available for that house you want to buy, right? So different loans are going to be eligible for different types of properties. If you want to live in a more urban area, you're going to have a little bit more variety of maybe single family homes, townhomes, condominiums, right? Is that a high-rise condo or is it under 4 stories? That all matters when you get your financing. If you're looking more suburban or rural, things like log cabins, homes on acreage, manufactured homes, those are going to be more options that you could see in more rural areas. And each one of those is very specific when it comes to the financing. So I want to circle back to urban areas where condos and single family homes are typically the 2 types of housing units that we see. Now, single family homes are going to be the most wide, broad financing that you can find, meaning there's going to be a lot of different types of loans that you can get on a single family home, right? Conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, alternative financing is also available on single family homes. Depending on how you're going to use that home will dictate what type of loan is going to work best for you. Now, condos are a little bit different. Condos are their own separate category when it comes to financing because they have different risk factors involved, right? Not necessarily risk factors for the buyer, but more so risk factors for the lender. So that being said, condos sometimes can require bigger down payments, require higher interest rates, or tougher underwriting standards. One of the reasons for this is a lot of you probably remember back in, I believe it was 2021 or 2022, a condo building just outside of Miami, Florida collapsed. That event single-handedly changed how the mortgage industry lends on condos, because what happened is super tragic, but the building collapsed, and unfortunately all those condos in that building were at one point financed if they were not purchased in cash, right? So all those loans in that building went bad and people couldn't pay them back for the most part, right? So those types of risk factors when it comes to condos are you're collectively owning the building with a bunch of other homeowners, right? Homeowners associations equals collective ownership. You have things like HOA fees and other things you have to worry about. So the mortgage industry says, okay, it's a little harder to get financing on condos. So that's just one thing you got to look at. Now, I'm not saying that condos are necessarily a bad purchase. Usually they're going to be lower purchase price. They might be in better parts of town. Bigger bang for your buck buying a condo versus a single family home. But you just have to be aware of these types of things going into the process because it will affect your financing. So switching it up a little bit and looking at more suburban or rural areas of Tennessee, you're going to see different types of financing versus, loans for condos and stuff like that. We're going to see more manufactured housing, homes on acreage, and even homes that are kind of unique, right? Like log cabins or something like that. Anytime you have a home that is a little bit unique, or it's a manufactured home, or it's sitting on acreage, those types of things matter when it comes to the financing. Sometimes if homes are too unique, it's too hard to compare them to others in the area. For example, if you want to buy a log cabin, but you're in the middle of town and you're only one of very, very few log cabins in that town, most mortgage companies will not be able to comp that, and you will not be able to get an appraisal, which will not allow you to be able to buy that log cabin. However, if you want to buy a log cabin in the mountains, like the Smoky Mountains or something like that of Tennessee, that's easy to comp because there's tons of log cabins out there. So it depends on what type of home and where you're buying it. So typically over about 10 acres, it gets harder to get financing for a property like that in the traditional mortgage sense. Now, there is other types of financing that are not mortgages, but we're talking about mortgages, so it's harder to get these types of loans on acreage properties. Last one I'll mention is manufactured housing. Manufactured housing is becoming kind of more popular just with the price of new homes these days, whereas manufacturing, they've gotten much, much better, and they've innovated so much in the manufactured housing space that we're seeing more and more manufactured homes and subdivisions be built in rural areas of Tennessee. It's very specific if it was manufactured in a warehouse or if it was built on the property, with sticks and cement. Those are two very different types of houses, and you'll actually have to look at a different type of loan, different type of mortgage to get a manufactured house. Make sure that it falls into the category that you were pre-approved for. That's gonna make sure that the loan that you were looking at originally is still available to you. Just make sure to check with whoever you're pre-approved with and make sure that the property that you're looking at works for your pre-approval. Another thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to buying homes in Tennessee is the Tennessee Association of Realtor typical purchase and sale contract is one that I believe, in my experience, is more generous to home buyers necessarily than home sellers. Now, the reason I say that is because every state has a different purchase contract that they use for their home purchases and home sales, okay? It's called a purchase and sale agreement, and that's the contract that the buyers and the sellers sign when a property is getting sold. In the state of Tennessee, there are a few things inside that contract that I believe make it a little bit better for the buyer versus other states. So one example is in most states, there is a due diligence period or a contingency period that has a hard set end date, okay? So things like the financing contingency, all the time that it takes to secure your financing, and inspection periods and stuff like that. In other states, it's usually like a 2 to 3 week period where you have to do all of that stuff. After that, you cannot back out of the contract, or unless you want to breach the contract, right? Which would, cost you money. In the state of Tennessee, specifically, that financing contingency is the entire length of the contract. So it's not 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's the entire length of the contract. So that's just one example of something in the Tennessee Purchase and Sale Agreement that's a little bit more biased toward buyers, in my opinion, because they give you a little bit more leeway and a little more flexibility inside that contract. A lot of people ask me, what is the right time to buy a home in the state of Tennessee? And this is kind of general for probably a lot of other states and other areas of the country, is normally in the wintertime as the weather starts to cool off a little bit, the housing market cools off as well. Not as many people are listing their homes in the December, January, February months, but they kind of wait until the springtime warms up a little bit before listing. And so there's just gonna be generally less homes available in the wintertime. And so naturally we see the real estate market cool off a little bit in the winter and then pick up again in the spring. And so typically I tell people, if you wanna get a really good deal on a house, winter is actually a great time, because anybody who's selling their home in the winter is a very serious seller. Like, they have to sell their home, or it's a property flipper that's trying to sell their home and they missed the hot buying season, so now they're listing in the slower season. So sometimes there's really good deals to be had in the wintertime, but if you wait until the spring, summer, fall, a little bit more listings available here in the state of Tennessee.